I'm Barry Kibrick, and I want to thank all of you who have been tuning into our show via YouTube. As a staple on PBS, I'm so grateful that you can now see our full episodes online. I hope you're enjoying them, and please subscribe to our channel so I can continue to make them available to all. Thank you. My guest who was scheduled for today was Dr. John Izzo with his book, The Five Thieves of Happiness. I was informed yesterday that John could not make it to the taping. But I already read the book and had all my notes prepared, so what's a host to do? An experiment. I'm going it alone. So this episode is just me, you, and the wise words of Dr. John Izzo. Dear viewers, this is an experiment. John was supposed to be here. He, at the very last minute, had to undergo a procedure. But his book, The Five Thieves of Happiness, and the subject is so important at this particular time, I decided I wanted to go over it and share it with you. And I think what we'll do is the same way I do it with my guest, but you are my guest right now. I'm going to read John's words and then give you my sense of what this is all about. And we'll see if it works. John, first of all, uses the word happiness, and he means it in a deep sense of what is right. It's very similar to what our founding fathers used it as. It's not so much about, did you have a good time at that party? Oh, it made me happy. Or did you like that new garden? Oh, that's what makes me happy. That is not the type of happiness we're discussing here. We're discussing here the happiness that comes when you have the inner knowledge and wisdom that you are literally living a fulfilled life. A life that you know has purpose and meaning. It's not very different from what our founding fathers meant when they said the pursuit of happiness. They were not talking about going out and partying. They were talking about, for the first time in history, the ability for humankind to live a life that they chose, that no government could interfere with it, nothing can interfere with it. They made it so important they put it in the Declaration of Independence. But it's kind of funny, when I was reading the book, I know for a fact John is from Canada. So I thought, maybe this is why he said these words. Is it possible that the very pursuit of happiness has within it the seeds of unhappiness? And that's what I want to talk about, because if you go to the bookstore, if you go to Amazon, if you go to Barnes & Noble, wherever you go, you'll see, mostly in the self-help section, thousands of books on happiness. And all of them are doing their best to help you find a way to happiness, that deep happiness that I'm talking about. But it seems that if there's so many books with that in mind, maybe we are taking it in the wrong direction. And John clearly believes that in this book. We'll go over some of the quotes from the book. We don't need to seek happiness as much as we have to get out of its way. I know for a fact, in my own experience, I get in my own way. I think that's what most of us do. We get in our own way. Now, I never really associated that with happiness until I came upon The Five Thieves of Happiness and realized that if I'm in my own way, how can I get out of my way? And John's belief is that inherently, our natural state is one of happiness, but we're being robbed of it by, as he calls, five thieves. And we're going to go over each of these thieves and see what he's talking about. The first thing is, John uses the word thieves because he uses them as meaning the internal thought ideas that are going on in our head, our obsessions, our vicious cycles. And in fact, I know from my own experience, what happens when I get in that mode, I go from thinking, all right, I know I have so much to be thankful for. Why am I feeling unhappy? And then I go deeper, and then I get upset at myself for why am I feeling unhappy knowing that I have all these wonderful things. And then I get angry at that for why am I knowing this and still doing that. And I joke, my son says, Dad, you have to write a book about the things you've learned but still don't know. And happiness is one of them. And that's why I wanted to share this with you. He says the thieves are disguised as friends. And what John means by that is we're often in what we feel is our comfort zone with these patterns because we've had these patterns from the beginning of our existence. This feeling that for some reason we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. We are, in a sense, as my mother used to say, and all my first, second, third, and fourth grade teachers, we're not living up to our potential. And the biggest problem is even knowing what your potential is. How do we know what our potential is? This is part of the problem, according to John, when we seek happiness instead of just letting ourselves get out of the way and letting it find us. I want to start with the first one, as there are 5. The first one is control. This thief wants us to believe that if we try hard enough, we will be able to control the outcomes of our life. This, as the first one, is the one I have some of the most difficulty with. I'm not a control freak by any way or shape, or at least I don't believe so. But deep inside, I cannot let go of that sense of control. And I'm not certain if that's what everybody's issue is, but it's one of the big, deep issues of mine. I don't want to give up that control. So at first when I'm reading this, I'm already, in a sense, disagreeing with some of it conceptually. But John takes us to something that helped me at least get around that notion, and it's this. He says, don't confuse control or acceptance with passivity. I think that was where I got caught up. I thought if I wasn't in control, it meant that I was not doing anything, that I was being passive, that I would just let things go and roll off your back and therefore find happiness. But that is not the case. Passivity is you're doing nothing. John doesn't want us to do nothing, and neither is any of the philosophers that he bases his book on. And in fact, John bases a lot of it on, it's interesting, he's an interesting character. He was a theologian of the Christian faith. He's a Buddhist, as well as a professor and a number of master degrees and doctorates. But yet he knew that there was this problem if we grew attached to that control. That's the thing that we have got to learn not to do. It's okay to want that control, but you can't be attached to the outcomes of it. And that's why he says they're disguised as friends, because they've been with us for so long again, all of those feelings that we have. Where I mentioned the Buddhist element of it, because in Buddhism, they always talk about expectations and desires being the root to unhappiness. And John wants to say something interesting. He says, desire is good. Once again, what's negative is the sticky attachment to outcome that is not. That's, again, where I personally have a big problem. If I desire something, no matter how much self-talk I do to myself, I expect the outcome. There's no getting around it. I can read 1,000 books on happiness that say, don't be attached to the outcome. Don't be expecting the outcome. That's just not going to happen for me. I now have to figure out a way to deal with that not happening, because I cannot separate the desire from the expectation. Some of you may be perfectly capable of doing that, but I cannot. So what I figured out that I had to do was live with that and not punish myself for being that way. Just that slight adjustment seemed to make enough of a difference where a sort of disgruntled personality may have taken up a larger portion of my thought process. When I was able to come to terms with certain things that weren't going to happen no matter how much I read, in a weird way that eased up the pressure. That's a lot of what's going on in John's book. It's not so much that you're going to be successful in pulling all of these thieves out of your head, but it's coming to terms with them and not allowing them to shape your existence. Another quote from John's book. When we imagine future things that may worry us, we must be mindful of the thief and brush it aside. Now, that's an interesting thing. We're always told to live in the moment. And obviously, if we're thinking about the past or the future, we're not in the moment, and we know that. Again, living in the moment, great phrase, a great term, a wonderful thing if you can do it. I cannot. The moment lasts for just that, a moment. And then I'm already in the future. I'm already thinking of the things in the future. Now, the past, for whatever reason, I am not bothered with. Some of you may be dealing with issues of past things. Those are much more difficult, I think, to deal with. But the future, when I'm able to realize that I am willing to accept the moments of my expectations not being met, I can brush them aside. So the key here is not to, again, eliminate, but it's to move to the side those things that get in the way of true happiness, which, again, I want to emphasize, means fulfilling what you were meant to do with a sense of joy and with a sense of ease. I don't think you can do it if it's a constant struggle. I think there must be a sense of ease even within the struggle. John says there is also nothing inherently unhelpful about reflecting on the past, which I spoke about. But, as I said, you've got to brush it away because that's the thing you can't change. The future, you actually go back to control. If they can't get rid of control, you have this much control in the future. The truth is, we know for a fact that randomness truly rules our lives, and that's just a fact. 99.9% of everything that's going to happen to us is random. How we deal with that randomness is what's going to be another key to happiness. Here's what is very important according to John. We must recognize that a thief is part of our own inner nature, not some foreign visitor. So as we look further into this and we realize that these thieves that steal this are created by us, because it's a part of us, It is, as John says, impossible to get rid of. But the awareness of it, the awareness that that thief is there, I'm going to actually tell you what John says. Replace that judgment that you have with yourself with this word, curiosity. Curiosity, when you replace judgment with curiosity, you literally open up an entire new world for yourself. Because what judgment and blame does is it creates a spiraling effect of dissatisfaction. But curiosity, if you replace the judgment, even if you did something heinous, well, let's take it away. Let's leave evil out of this discussion, because I think that's for a whole different type of a show. But let's say you did something really wrong, something you regret, something that truly brought you down and unhappy. You have got to be able to look at that as a new opportunity. I will tell you something. This show itself would not exist if I didn't have something happen to me that was, in my opinion, terrible. Wasn't an accident or anything. It was a business deal. But it was terrible. And in a sense, when I saw what came out of it, I have to almost be thankful for that. I think that's where we have to go when we are feeling this internal misery. So if we're feeling the fact that we didn't do what we were supposed to do today, and we then wallow in that, we are not saying, hey, I'm curious. Why didn't I do what I said I would do? How can I do it the next time? And for the record, I do that almost every day as well, because I am constantly making the same mistake. I always love those people that say, I never make the same mistake twice. I make only the same type of mistake over and over and over and over again. The type of thing that I'll do is in my nature. So it's not going out of the way. So again, I could choose to hate myself for that. Sometimes I do. But when I am able to sit back and look at it with a sense of curiosity, with looking at it as a belief that I can learn from it, I at least at that moment in time get back to that sense of happiness. The second thief is conceit. John describes that as an overemphasis on your personal importance. Now, of course, someone like myself couldn't possibly have to deal with that thief. No way. Actually, he uses it in a certain way. Listen to this. That thief causes us to constantly obsess about our place in the world. So be careful of that thief in particular, because, as John says, and I think this is important to get exactly right, much of our misery comes when that story of our life does not match some ideal narrative we have about how our life might be. But all the wonderful things that really make up a life do most often just happen. But if you're focused so much on your internal thieves and what they're doing, you lose that appreciation. And I have done it over and over again and will continue to. But if we can gain control over it just even a little, brush that thief aside, as John says, we have a pretty good chance. The third thief is coveting. And now we're getting biblical, literally. As its core, this thief constantly tells us that our senses of self comes from reference to the outside world, focused on the question, how do I compare? My wife will share some great stories about this. When I started in this business, I would read the Hollywood Reporter, Variety, and I would see a person 3 months younger than me, already successful. I would see some guy who sold a script and he wasn't even half my age. I would see everything I wanted to see. I could not stop comparing myself to that. To this day, just yesterday, I sent my son an email. I said, look, I'll even give you the exact example. TED Talks are now having TED Conversations. Is my career going to blow up because of that? I got worried about it. I was saying, how can I compete with TED Talks? Well, the fact is I don't compete with anyone, basically. In fact, you might be the only person watching me right now. But I, again, have to do so with a sense of humor when I look at that. It still happens. I'm 40 years later still comparing myself. But again, the thief is only there for a brief moment now. And you know what's really important, according to John, about that particular thief? He writes, it takes away our capacity to be grateful. There is nothing better in life than feeling gratefulness. Once you feel gratefulness, you literally brush away all the thieves. Because when you become aware of the wonders, that's the problem. We focus in, just like the news does, they focus in only on that bad thing. We lose the sense of wonder when we lose that sense of gratefulness. That gratefulness, even as I say it, it brings a joy to you. You have to look when you are feeling down and dirty in the mud of unhappiness. Just peek around that corner. Look at all that you really have to be grateful for. Maybe it's simply the cat you have, the dog. Maybe it's as simple as the neighbor who knocks on your door and says, "How you doing today?" Be grateful as often as you can, and you will slap that thief right in the face. The fourth thief is consumption. This thief tells us that happiness is out there. John's whole book is based on that concept that when we think that happiness is out there, happiness is something we can find or consume, we're barking up the wrong tree. It is within us and only within us. He even says the work inside the house is more difficult, meaning inside our head. But because it is the place where happiness ultimately lies, that is where we have to find it. So be very careful about looking outside for this. That's why John says, stop trying to seek that happiness by some mystical way. And last but not least, the fifth comfort. Routine is deadening to the human soul. This thief, John says, may be the hardest to notice because comfort and routine are not bad within themselves, and they're not. That is the beauty of this and John's wisdom, is that we can have our routine and we can have our comfort, but what you don't want to do is allow to have those negative thoughts, those negative feelings, those unhappy, queasy moments to be your comfort zone. That's when you have to get out of that zone. You have to do what you need to do. And by that, I'll be specific. We have to get back to that gratefulness. I always get a sense that somehow right over here, I understand and know something, but I can't get it into here. John says you can. He calls that being the knower. To perform and reform those thieves, we must meet another power of our human nature, the knower. We know what it is, and we know how to observe ourselves objectively, and that is what we need to do. So as I end all my shows, I first want to, though, leave you with John's website. It's drjohnizzo.com, and I want you to be able to follow him at Twitter at Dr. John Izzo. And now, before I leave, I'd like to leave you with these words from the Five Thieves of Happiness. Whether we believe we are here by cosmic choice or cosmic chance, humanity needs a unifying story about who we are at this moment in history, a story powerful enough to guide us through the dangerous and opportunistic time in our evolution. I'm Barry Kibrick. Between danger and opportunity, and whether it is by cosmic choice or cosmic chance, happiness is just a small shift in perspective. It is within you, and no need to look much further than that. Thank you.
To connect with Barry, like him on Facebook and follow him on Twitter at Barry Kibrick. And to contact Barry directly, view past episodes of Between the Lines, and read his weekly blog, visit us at barrykibrick.com. Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick is made possible in part by Sam Ash Music, a proud sponsor of Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick. Sam Ash has been serving musicians since 1924. To unlock your inner musician, information is available at samash.com.